Hey guys, it's Kristi with Stone Family Farmstead. This is video number 2 in my Making Fruit Wine series. In part 1, I talked about all of the equipment that you're going to need. So if you haven't yet seen that one, please go back and watch that and then come back to this one, because I'm going to be mentioning things, and if you haven't seen that other video, you won't know what you're using them for or whatever, or maybe things might just feel a little bit vague. So anyways, this video we're going to talk about putting together the wine mash. Now all that the mash is it's water, fruit, yeast, and some other things, and we're going to get that started in our fermenting bucket. Next week I'll post a video on how to drain that and what to do with the mash at that point, and then in 30 days after that, we'll talk about siphoning and bottling and that kind of stuff. So this is probably going to have 3 to 5 videos. I'm really just not sure. It depends on the batch of wine. Just stay tuned for it, and I'll make sure that it gets into a playlist so that it's easy for you to find it. And actually, if this is not June of 2020 for you, if this is like in the future, there should be a playlist on my channel on YouTube where you can watch all 5 videos back to back so you can see the whole process. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So basically what we're going to need for this project is a stock pot, and it should be at least 6 quarts. You're going to need your Star San mixed up, and that is this product here, and what that's for is for sanitizing everything. I have it in a spray bottle that I can just spray onto things. It's kind of like using a disinfectant for your kitchen counters, where you spray it on and you leave it on for 30 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever, and it sanitizes everything. So that's what Star San is for. You're also going to need 12 to 16 cups of water. I would just go ahead and start with 12. When you're putting it into the jug later in the process, you can add water to bring the level up to what you need. So that way you're not watering it down if you're starting with 16 cups of it. You're also going to need sugar. Just regular granulated sugar is fine. About 3 to 4 pounds. I normally use 4 pounds of fruit to about 3.5 pounds of sugar, and that usually gives me the gravity reading I'm looking for, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The other things that you're going to need are dry wine yeast, pectic enzyme, tannin powder, acid blend, Campton Tabs, yeast nutrient, and you don't use a whole lot of any of those things. Another thing that you are going to need is your fermenting bucket. This is a 2-gallon one, so you're going to need that. You're going to need a long-handled spoon. You're going to need an airlock, and you're going to need a lid for your fermentation bucket that has a hole so that the airlock can sit in it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sanitize everything. So just make sure that everything you're sanitizing is clean. It doesn't have any food or anything weird on it. So just go ahead and make sure it's thoroughly wet, because you want it to sanitize. And you don't have to sanitize the pan though, because you're going to be heating up that water. But I am going to sanitize every part of the airlock. I'm not sure if you have to, but that's what I'm doing. And you want to sanitize the lid, the inside of the lid, not the outside, but just the inside. And you're going to let that sit for about 3 minutes. In the meantime, while we're waiting on that, I'm going to pour my 12 cups of water into my stock pot. I'm using purified drinking water just simply because it's easier for me to demonstrate using it, but I also have used just tap water, and that's fine too. So I don't know, sometimes people have a preference and sometimes people don't. I don't. I'm really kind of lazy and all about doing things super easy. And so, yeah, you'll probably see me doing whatever's easiest for the most part. So that's, this is a half gallon, so that's 8 cups, and I'm going to do 4 more. Whoops, I'll turn that around to the right. All right, I'll fill it up halfway. It's not necessary if you are like 100% right at 12 cups or 16. Okay, so now I've got my water in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid on and bring the water to a simmer. I'm not sure how long that's going to take, but when we get there, I'll be right back. Okay, my water's simmering, and here are my 3.5 cups of sugar. Grab my spoon. After you use the Star San, everything should be pretty dry. It should be allowed to dry. You don't wipe the Star San off, so I didn't make that clear last time. So I'm going to go ahead and dissolve the sugar in my simmering water. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm blocking what I'm doing here. Okay. And so basically, we're adding it in, stirring it, and we're gonna stir it until it all dissolves, and then remove it from the heat. And so, still feels a little crunchy in there. So it looks like it's pretty dissolved, so I'm going to remove it from the heat. And let's see, that's kind of warm. I'm going to remove it from the burner that it's on because it's still so hot. I'm going to move it to the back one, and I'm going to let it cool until it comes to room temperature, and then we'll continue our project. Okay guys, so yesterday I left it where I heated up the water, and then I put the sugar in and let it dissolve, and I ended up getting busy, and so I had to just leave my sugar water out, but I left it covered in my stock pot, and it's waiting for me to add the fruit in. Now, because yesterday I sanitized everything, I'm going to sanitize it again today, and I'm also going to include the fruit bag. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm going to sanitize this again, and I want to let this stuff sit until it dries. And so it's probably going to take, you know, probably about 15-20 minutes or so. In the meantime, I've got my sugar water in here, and everything looks really good. And so as soon as everything's dry, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, everything's dry now, pretty much. There's a little bit of wetness still on the lid, but that's okay. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add our sugar water into our fermentation bucket. And remember, this is cooled to room temperature. I left mine overnight, but covered, and so I'm sure that'll be fine. And then here's my fruit. So the fruit I'm using today are cherry berry blend and then some Chardonnay grapes. They're about half and half. I put the Chardonnay grapes in first. So what's the deal with that? So what I want to do is to add all of the fruit to the mesh bag. And so obviously it's not going to really work for me to dump that into the mesh bag because my mesh bag is too thin. So I'm going to have to use a measuring cup to kind of scoop it in. Now I used frozen fruit. All of this fruit here was frozen and thawed. So they say, the winemakers that is, say that it's best to use, or it's really good to use frozen fruit. Some say it's best, and the reason is because it's kind of squishy and you can get more of the juice out of it. I've got nearly all of it, and so I'm just going to dump the rest and the juice through. The reason I don't dump the juice right into the container is because there are little sticks and things like that. So I'm just going to, because there's a lot of like sticks and debris here, I'm just going to tie it up here where there isn't any debris, and where, so that none of that debris will get out into my mixture here. It does get strained and everything, but it's just so much easier when there's not a lot going on outside of the mesh bag as far as like debris and things like that. So if you were going to use fruit that was not frozen, you would chop your fruit up into bite-sized pieces, or coarsely chop it, and then you can keep berries whole and everything, but if it's like another kind of fruit, peaches or something like that, then what you would do is use a potato masher, and you would want to have sanitized it. But I'm going to, since my fruit was actually frozen before and it's pretty squishy, I'm going to use my very clean hands that I just washed to squeeze the juice out of my fruit. And so this wouldn't work very well with peaches, because peaches, can be kind of hard, but unless they were super ripe or frozen before. So I'm going to go ahead and do this for a bit. And once I'm finished squeezing all this and kind of matching it all, then I'm going to set the whole bag into the mixture. The point for this is to extract as much of the juice as you can from the fruit. So it's obviously much easier to do if the fruit is squishier. So you can see how my juice, or how the mash is becoming really, really dark. And so this is really going to be sort of a dark colored wine. So you're going to want to get as much of this out as you can, but remember that we're going to submerge this again, and then we're going to end up doing the same thing before we remove the fruit. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I think I did pretty good. And I'm going to let this be submerged. And the next thing to do is to take a hydrometer reading. I'm going to give my hydrometer and my measuring cup and things a squirt with the Star San. All right. And remember to be really careful with your hydrometer on your granite counters because they break so easily. So I'm going to let those sit for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll do the hydrometer reading. Okay, so everything's dry, and so what I want to do now is to fill my hydrometer container. I forget what this is called. And I'm going to measure the gravity. So you fill it up about 3/4 of the way. I'm going to go up to this line here. It says 250. And the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that when we put the hydrometer in, that it actually does not overflow. I had a vessel to do my hydrometer readings before that was much easier because it was a clear glass. So I'm going to recommend to use a clear glass one. It looks like I've got about a 1.116. So I want to write that down somewhere because I'm going to take the readings a few times during the brewing of this. Usually my readings are 1.090, but this one, probably because of the grapes and the sweetness of the berries and all the juice and everything, it's getting a higher reading. And the reading is actually for the sugar content, and the higher the sugar content, the higher the alcohol content it will be. So just keep that in mind. So now that the hydrometer reading is done, I'm going to take one Campton Tab and I'm going to put it between 2 spoons and crush it the best I can. Okay, and I want it to be a powder. I don't know if you could see that very well. I don't have auto zoom, so. And then I'll stir this. And the last thing I'm going to do today is to snap the lid on. And you want the lid to be nice and tight. And then I'm going to add, there's a very faint line here, and I'm going to add water up to there, and it could just be tap water. Okay, so I've got it about right. And then I'm going to float the inside piece in here, and then I'm going to add the lid, and I'm going to pop this right into the lid, and I'm going to let this sit. So now that I've got my airlock into the lid of the fermenting bucket, I'm going to go ahead and let that sit for 24 hours while the Campton Tab sterilizes the fruit and everything inside of there. And then in 24 hours, we'll come back and add the yeast mixture. Okay, so it's been 24 hours. We've got the wine mixture in the fermentation bucket with the fruit. We just haven't put in the yeast yet. So we're gonna make the mixture, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. Then we're gonna wait an hour, and then we're gonna add it. So let's go ahead and make the yeast mixture first. Okay, so here's our fruity liquid. We're gonna leave the fruit inside of here, but we're eventually gonna add the yeast mixture into here. But first what we need to do is we need to sanitize a quart jar, a spoon, and a measuring cup. So I just sprayed these with the Star San, so I'm gonna wait a few minutes and let those dry, and then we'll start making our yeast mixture. So all my stuff is pretty dry, and we're going to take the measuring cup and just start adding some of this liquid, and you're going to need 1 cup. So I'm just using a dry measure, but it'll be fine if it's not exactly. The next thing we'll do is I'm going to pour the packet of yeast over the top. Make sure you get all of it out. And with your sterilized spoon, you're going to stir it all up. And the yeast will kind of get stuck on the sides of the jar, so just kind of push that down. But you can always get it a little bit later. The next thing you're going to want to do is just put a piece of plastic. I'm sure if you don't have any plastic wrap, you can probably put some other like a lid on it or something like that. And you're going to let this sit for about an hour. In the meantime, let's go ahead and put the lid back on so we don't get any bacteria. So now that that's working, we'll be back in an hour to check it. Okay, it's been about an hour, and so now you can see basically all the bubbles. Let me focus a little bit so you can see that. There's a lot of bubbling going on, and so that means this is ready to pour into the wine mash. So we're going to open this up again. And remember, this had been sitting for 24 hours with the lid on with a Campton Tab in it. And that Campton Tab was disinfecting all of the fruit and the wine mash. So basically what we have here is a sterilized wine mash. So we're going to go ahead and open up and pour in the yeast mixture. We are also going to, at this time, add the yeast nutrient, the acid blend, the pectic enzyme, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of tannin. So first I'm going to need 1 teaspoon of yeast nutrient. Remember, this is what's going to feed the yeast and keep it doing its job. The next thing is acid blend, and we can use up to 2 teaspoons of it. I'm going to go ahead and just use 2 teaspoons, but remember, this is one of those things that you can add some now and some later. I'm just going to go ahead and do 2, just because I don't want to have to try to remember it later, and I think it'll be fine. I need a 1/2 teaspoon of pectic enzyme. Make sure this is a 1/2, yep. Might want to, I'm fudging this a little bit, but don't fudge it your first time, because if you do, then you'll wonder if anything weird happened. You'll wonder if it was that. So, and the next thing I'm going to add is 1/8 of a teaspoon of tannins. Now remember, with the tannins, if you know that you're allergic to that, you don't have to add this. But I don't think I'm allergic to it, and besides, full disclosure, I actually don't drink anymore, so this isn't going to be something that affects me at all anyways. Okay, so now that I have added all of these ingredients, I'm going to go ahead and stir vigorously with a sanitized spoon, and I'm going to go along the sides where there's like chunks of tannin, because some of these, when you put powder directly into a liquid, it's sometimes you need to smash those powder beads. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stir this pretty vigorously. It's got all the ingredients in it so far. And then, whoops, I'm stuck. There we go. So then the next thing that we want to do is to go ahead and add the lid with the airlock back on it. Check your water level. It looks like my water level is down a little bit in the airlock, so I'm going to add a teeny bit more of water. You'll have to check your airlocks every once in a while, especially if your brew is not right in front of you. You're going to want to check your airlocks, because sometimes they dry out, and that's not a great thing. And what we're going to do is to leave all this mixture inside of the fermentation bucket with the airlock on for 7 days. And then we're going to come back and we're going to transfer only the liquid into a 1 gallon jug for our secondary fermentation. So now that we have the lid back on the fermentation bucket with the airlock, you're going to end up seeing some bubbling happening inside of the airlock. That's normal, that's what needs to happen. Then we're going to leave our mixture in the fermentation bucket for 7 days, and after that we are going to remove the fruit and transfer the liquid to a 1 gallon jug for a secondary ferment, and that's going to be the next video. So I'll see you then. Don't forget to ask any questions that you have down in the comments, and make sure to check out the show notes for all the links if you didn't get all of your stuff, or if you're just seeing this and you didn't catch my last video, which was gathering your equipment, part 1 of making fruit wines. You want to go back and watch that. If you don't want to go back and watch it and you just want to start gathering stuff, all that's down in the show notes and you can shop for all that today. And then come back, watch this video again, and then watch all the rest of the videos in the series. If you are watching not in June 2020, but if you're watching in June 2020, then you may have to wait for the next few videos to come out. But don't worry, I'm taking you completely from start to finish through the making fruit wine process. So anyway, see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching.